Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. Welcome to today's webinar, No Bull, No Hype, The Truth About AI in Process Manufacturing, where we will explore some of the findings of Datacor's recent AI research. Before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping items. Please enter your questions in the Q&A tab that's located at the bottom of your screen. We will answer as many of those as possible when we're finished with the presentation. This webinar will be recorded, and webinar attendees will also receive a copy of the complete survey reports after the webinar. With that, I'd like to go ahead and introduce you to today's speakers. Sundar Kupaswamy is Datacor's Chief AI Officer and brings over 20 years of experience turning AI and data science into real business outcomes. He's held senior data science leadership roles at Sabre, one of the world's largest travel technology companies, and Asurion, where he led machine learning and generative AI initiatives, transforming customer experience for millions of users. As Chief AI Officer, Sundar is now advancing Datacor's commitment to making AI a core competitive advantage for process manufacturers. He holds a master's in systems and industrial engineering from the University of Arizona and serves on the technical advisory board for Georgia Tech's graduate program in data science and analytics. Joining Sundar today is Jim Brown, founder and president of Tech-Clarity, an independent research firm he founded in 2002. Tech-Clarity covers topics related to digital transformation for manufacturing and industrial companies. Jim brings over 30 years of experience spanning both manufacturing and software, including holding executive roles in engineering, strategy, and product development at ERP, PLM, and supply chain software companies. So now that I have introduced the speakers, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Sundar to share the purpose of today's research findings.
Hey, thank you, Tracy. And glad to be here and happy to share our learnings from the survey that Jim and his team helped us with. Let me just begin by saying why this matters to us. Typically, whenever we build, solutions to solve problems using AI, we are not building it for ourselves. We are building it, for our customers, our users. So we want to hear in their own words on what matters to them, what problems matter to them, where they are in their AI journey, what's blocking them, or what's been a catalyst for them, what's their learnings, where they're seeking for help, so on and so forth. And I'll actually let Jim kind of cover the methodology of the survey and all that. But that's really the purpose of the survey because we believe in building our solutions with the theme of partnership and shaping our products together with our users. So I'll let Jim cover the overview of the survey. Jim?
Great. Thank you, Sundar. And thanks for including me today and working with me on the research. We had a great opportunity to really learn about what companies are really doing with AI from an adoption perspective and investment perspective, progress, the impact that it's making on their businesses. So we took the time, we created a survey, distributed it web-based as well as social media. We had over 250 companies in the process manufacturing industry, specifically chemical, food and animal nutrition, and engineering companies respond to the survey. And we were able to analyze their results and create this set of statistics that we're going to share today. But also there are three resulting reports, one for the chemical industries, one for food and animal nutrition, and one for engineering. And they really drill down nicely into an understanding of what people are trying to accomplish and what they've achieved. So excited to share the results with you today and also learn from Sundar and a lot of his experience. So actually, before we go into some of our results, why don't we start with a poll question? We'd like to understand a little bit from the audience today what your goals are from AI. So is it possible to bring up the poll, the first? Excellent. So if you can share with us what your company's primary business goal for artificial intelligence is. Is it product or service quality, business efficiency and cost, improving customer experience, or directly more your product and service cost. So we're going to give people just a second to get some responses in, and then we're going to share those back out as soon as those numbers start to settle down. If you could share them back, I can't see the actual numbers coming in, so I'll trust when you think that the right time to share them is. So this is interesting. We see a very strong, as a researcher, when you see something show up that strongly, you're onto something. Business efficiency and cost shows up right at the top of the list, and customer experience and product and service quality a little bit lower, and product and service cost the beneath that, which that one is a little surprising to me. Um, Sundar, any gut reactions from your end on these things? I think they align in some ways with this survey. I know that you and I are going to talk about customer experience in a minute. So
Yeah, definitely. It's it's not surprising. When I talk to our customers, I do see efficiency and productivity kind of rise up to the top. Customer experience, definitely, yes. Improving product quality and the cost of service, yeah, definitely. I see all of them. A few other things that I also hear is that I mean we are sitting on a gold mine of data, and leveraging data hasn't been easier, uh, ever before as it is now. So, maximizing on the opportunity for that is another angle. And then being able to anticipate problems before they happen versus just reacting to it, again, using data, is another aspect I hear. But let's see what the survey says, and we kind of go from there.
very good, very good. So, I think when we heard back from the survey respondents, we definitely heard something very similar, that cost and efficiency was really the highest area that companies were focused on, or the most common. And I think it's important when you look at a survey like this, that you understand that it's not necessarily the highest priority for any given company, but it's the most common across all of the companies we talk to. And I think it makes sense because, AI definitely can help to streamline things. It can help to reduce costs in a number of different ways. So the fact that that would be the most common, is it makes a lot of sense. Differently than the poll, I do see, we did see in the survey that production cost and product and service quality were both up there. Production costs close to 50%, close to half of the companies talked about that. And then quality, and then service again, because it was product and service cost. So not just in production, but actually, to maintain, you know, strong customer service, and then customer experience a little bit further down. Um, so anyway, I think there's two things that really I take away from this. The most common area that companies are focused on, but also the fact that there's just a really broad number of areas that companies are focused on. So Dar.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. And when we see cost and efficiency, it's probably, I feel it's the tip of the iceberg because, what I've learned is when they say cost and efficiency, yes, there is an aspect of trying to shrink the margins to maximize, revenue and growth. But then a lot of them want to redeploy people from, from mundane tasks to more providing white glove service for their customers. So, that sometimes I feel maybe those aspects gets bundled into your cost and efficiency. If I can be efficient in one part of the business, how can I redeploy them to another part and actually, provide more effectiveness there? Compliance is another one. It's important, has to be done, but can I do it in a more cost effective or a more efficient way? These are things where it all gets sometimes bundled up against cost and efficiency. So that's been my main thing that struck to me. But tell me this, Jim. I don't know. People might be wondering on why some of these percentages add up to be more than 100. So can you explain the stats and how the percentages are calculated? Yeah.
Yeah, no, great point, Sundar. As you look at these, this was a sort of select all question. It was what are the primary areas that your company is trying to accomplish with your AI initiatives. And so, yeah, the numbers total up to over 400%, including just the ones that are on this chart. And what that really says is that companies on average were picking four or maybe five different areas that they're focused on. So, somebody may have said cost and efficiency, and two-thirds of companies said cost and efficiency, but they probably, also said, they probably also picked several others. So some of the ones that may be less common for any given company may be just as important and may in fact be more urgent. Somebody may have an urgent product innovation need within their business and really focus on product innovation and just also happens to be focused on cost and efficiency. So I think the breadth of the targets, I think, is really important to understand from this chart. So let's go on to
Thanks,
this.
Jim. Yeah.
Yeah, the next one is really about these functional areas that companies want to improve. So, Sundar, I know you had some comments about this to start as well.
Yeah, I mean, looking at this, I mean, what strikes to me is even though there's a vertical big bar at the top with the plant, it's it feels like AI is being applied everywhere, and that's my takeaway. And even in my prior jobs, we've been able to benefit from AI across different departments. I don't come from the process manufacturing industry, but in the tech industry or the travel industry, I mean, you do have different departments, product, customer service, call centers, supply chain department, operations. You can benefit in pretty much every department, including HR, finance, and all that. So that's the parallel I see, but I'll let you talk through what you learned from the survey. Yeah.
Yeah. No, thanks, Sundar. And yeah, I think again the big message here is that it's not a single answer. AI is not a one-trick pony. It's not something that is just being applied in one area. And you see over half of the companies did say that they're focused on the plant, improving production efficiency, improving quality. And in the process industries, we've used different forms of AI in the plant for optimization for some periods of time. And obviously lots of new forms that are coming out. But you see other areas as well, see improving engineering, maybe with some sort of generative experiences working in those areas. But also front office and back office, as Sundar was saying, there's a lot of business functions that are really can really be improved, and a lot of the repetitive tasks, a lot of the things that are mundane, that are just more algorithmic, can be addressed by AI, and that's what we're really starting to see from companies. Back office, could be accounting functions, maybe a payables routine or something like that. Front office may actually be something that might be helping process orders, associating specs with products or something along those lines. So there's definitely a lot going on. We
Yeah,
also
feels like it's a question of where to begin and where to prioritize, more than anything else.
agreed. I mean, I think there's a lot of choices that are being made, and I think people are putting a lot of irons in the fire to try and do it a few different ways. And we actually did some drill downs on three different areas, one on the plant, one on R&D, and another on engineering. We're not going to have a chance to go through
Okay,
those in the webinar today, but Sundar, I know that those three reports cover those that you guys are going to share shortly. So,
cool.
all right, should we go on to the next data?
Great. So Jim, this looks like okay, different categories. Yeah. And uh, before I comment on this, quick question. Some categories look to be very similar. Uh, like eliminating manual tasks and eliminating manual data entries, ability to find data, ability to for better decisions or aggregating data for better decisions. Can you elaborate a little bit more on the categories and um, how you broke them up?
Yeah, no, great question, and it's a good observation. We looked at in some of the earlier ones, sort of where are we where are companies focused, and this is a little bit about how. And we didn't want to talk about things like, are you using agentic AI or retrieval augmented generation or all of the buzzwords that that we're all starting to even hear on CNN, listening to the news at night, but really focused on how are we trying to improve things. And there's inherent overlap in these, is exactly as you say, Sundar. I mean, if you look at sort of the categories of these, I would say there's basically three. One of them is sort of being able to have people make better decisions, whether that's directly making better decisions, or, as we start to look a little bit further down around the 53% ability to find data to make
Yeah.
decisions, aggregating data to make decisions. So there's sort of the better decision making category. There's avoiding repetitive and manual work, that efficiency. I think those are probably the two main areas that we start to see people focusing on. I think the one thing we don't see as much here is really sort of having AI run off and do things on its own, automating decisions, more of that agentic, lights out version. But we do see a lot of different ways that AI can help the business.
Yeah, I think I was reflecting in my head in terms of how we are thinking about AI at Datacor, how we are investing, and it fits neatly well. The first two buckets, exactly what you said, which is tackling a lot of document extraction and automation, because our visual LLMs have become so powerful now that you're able to do it much better than what OCR was capable of many, many years ago. So. Uh, that's one category. As I see these categories here for data, your challenges are not just in finding the data, but also, even if you know where the data is, aggregating it and making some decisions out of it or getting some insights out of it. And with our data lake investments, that's the problem we are trying to tackle as well. The third one that I do see here is exceptions, meaning even though there is not a complete, automation kind of thing, I think it's the last bar there, but uh, people want to manage exceptions rather than managing the norm. They want the AI to handle the norm. They want confirmation with a human in the loop saying it's all green, green, green. But they want to be able to focus on exceptions and just apply where the judgment is needed, kind of thing, which is a third category I see when I see these categories. So uh, that's kind of how it reflects in my head. It's kind of similar to what you uh, said, but curious, Jim, on in terms of readiness, what does your survey tell? How ready are our users for a lot of these things?
Yeah, it's a great question. And in the survey, we actually asked three different areas of readiness. And in the next the data that's coming up now, we focus on sort of the organizational readiness. But in the survey itself, we looked at three different aspects. We looked at data readiness, we looked at organizational readiness, and we looked at adoption readiness. And this one actually had some surprises for me, to be honest. I mean, as we looked at different areas, we definitely saw um, different levels of preparedness across organizational data and adoption. Um, but when we look specifically organizationally, the top ones, I guess, don't surprise me. What surprises me is the ones that are lower down on the list, because We hear all the time that companies don't necessarily know where to start or how to start. They don't necessarily have, deep AI skills, data science skills in their business. And they don't have, decades worth of experience on how to get value from AI the same way we do how to get out value out of an enterprise system, an ERP system, for example. There's a lot of best practices and lessons learned that we've been able to really build on top of over the years. So I'm not surprised about that. I'm not surprised to hear about not enough time to focus on it because I think a lot of times, people are getting the mandate, well, start using AI in your work to be more efficient. And, yes, that makes sense, but I've got my current job to do already the way I'm doing it. And now, I need to try and experiment on top of it. Um, so now the thing that surprised me, and I'm curious what you've seen too, but like, you know, I hear you hear a lot about distrust and organizationally the sort of fear and misunderstanding around AI being a big inhibitor, and I didn't see that here. That was one of the things that surprised me a little bit, and it was interesting because it was kind of across the different industry, the different areas of sort of food, chemical, and engineering.
Yeah, Jim, I think this slide was insightful. I was trying to uh, hypothesize the why between each of these categories and the numbers. Uh, so when I see lack of knowledge, uh, I'm not sure if it's really lack of knowledge. Let me explain what I'm trying to say. Uh, I mean, Gen AI is new. If somebody says, I'm the expert, I know everything, it's probably a false claim because all of us are learning as it's being built. It's not like civil engineering that's been there for, centuries that it's well mature and people know. People are learning. They're learning by making mistakes, and so on and so forth. It's just that some of us AI practitioners are a little ahead in the journey. That's it. But I believe all of us are learning. And that's one thing. So even the so-called experts are discovering new surprises as we are building it. So but it's going at a very fast uh, pace. Uh, Kind of reminds me like a Formula One where you're fixing the tire and you're racing at the same time. It gives me that feeling. So that's what it is. I feel. And the other thing I have also seen is that there is a cold start problem with AI, meaning uh, it takes time to discover the first use case. But then you find one, your people end up finding a lot more, and then you just start suddenly you have a big backlog of use cases because they understand what it's capable of doing. So I feel it's more about connecting the dots more than not having knowledge. It's they see something work a certain way and they say, oh, if this is possible, I can imagine 10 other possibilities, and it just skyrockets from there. So that's one thing I want to say as far as the top section of this. And yes, skills and data science and AI and engineering skills are needed, and you rely on your in-house or partners or whatever to get that help. I get that, but the top part, that's the point I wanted to say. And for the middle or the lower side, the trust and privacy concerns and all that, that's where a human in the loop comes in, meaning. I don't see human in the loop as a crutch. I see it more as a strategy because it builds trust. It helps make the AI work for you because it's not going to work the first time you put it out there. So, uh, I mean, it helps with even with the privacy concerns, all that stuff. So when you go into that approach, it addresses some of that things. So that's my reaction when I see this slide. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. So no, I couldn't agree more with the human in the loop. I mean, I think that's just where we are from a maturity perspective. And it's not just a blind, do we trust and
Yeah.
should we trust? We are still learning. And so, we definitely see more people trying to augment what people are doing, make them do things better, make them do things more efficiently, not necessarily just, take that human out of the process entirely. I know there's a lot of talk about, agents talking to agents in a cooperative framework and things like that. And
Yeah,
and
the
I
A to A framework. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's exciting, and I see there
Yeah.
a lot of potential for that. But I do think that the days of lights out are a long way in front of us, and there's just tremendous amount of value to gain with humans working directly with AI and that human in the loop mode. So,
Yeah,
all
I
right.
think it'll be, oh, this is interesting. Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
Well, let's
Oops.
actually we might have shared the results here. I'm curious what the audience has done so far. Those that are joining us today, and I'm sure some of them are Datacor customers, and some of them are others. Just the same way with the audience in the survey. But let's bring up the poll question,
Yeah,
and
let's do that.
let's try and understand how far along webinar guests, how far you've made it. Are you still, at the point where you haven't made plans yet? And maybe this webinar is going to help you make those plans. Are you in planning mode? Sometimes, we see companies that have started pilots or POCs, proofs of concept. Others have completed pilots and proofs of concept, and then we've seen others further on, and we'll share this data in a second from the survey that have made progress even beyond their original pilots, their original proofs of concept, and scaled things a little bit further. Um, so I'm curious what our audience looks like today, and then we'll compare that to the group that we had in the survey itself. All right, so I think we've got a few less early leaders in the group today than we had in the in the early stages or in the survey that we did before. But we see a few more, at least beyond the planning, the no plans mode, and into the planning mode. So there's definitely hopefully this will be a helpful webinar for people to get themselves started and start to move more towards the pilots, because it's about just over a quarter of gone into pilots, proofs of concept, or made progress beyond it. Congratulations to those 2% that were able to make progress beyond their pilots and POCs so far, setting the way for the rest of us. So if we look at the data from the charts, we did see a little bit more maturity in the survey respondents so far, a little bit more progress. We broke it down into three different areas. These aren't standard benchmarks that we use or anything like that. But we really saw that 42% were sort of lagging behind a little bit in the no plans, in the planning mode. That there was definitely pre proof of concept, pre pilot, and really hadn't made that first leap into at least an official project or something in their company. The vast majority of the people from the survey, or the majority, I would say, the sort of the bell curve in the middle were experimenters. Those were the ones that, maybe had some initiatives in place, had a proof of concept, maybe one or more proof of concepts, started. Then the last group that we saw were really the early leaders, and that's those 7% that had said that they had gone beyond proofs of concept or pilots. And those are the ones that have actually been able to maybe repeat things and scale things. And I think it's interesting. You see a lot of statistics out. I mean, I'm not, we're not the only ones that have done a survey on this in recent times. And I think you see a lot of people that talk about things that maybe that companies that are behind, or things that are not being successful. We'll talk a little bit about success in a minute. But I think what we're just seeing is that people are trying, they're experimenting, they're learning, and that's really what we see in that middle area. But there definitely is a range of where people are from a progress perspective.
Yeah, I think, I mean, if we were to wonder, how people can move from, from one category to the other, I would say uh, many times people are looking for a nail with a hammer in their hand, saying, where do I apply AI? Versus I would suggest to just start with the problem and ask the five whys on why it matters and just get convinced on the problem you want to solve. And that kind of, gets you not stuck in the experimenting mode for too long, I feel. And then it can be, a very narrow wedge that you can start with. It doesn't have to be something very transformational to begin with. So that helps you. AI works very well with narrow boundaries and gets you a higher likelihood of success. And I mean, typically what I've seen is when with any of such solutions, you have a combination of an AI practitioner working with a domain expert. And when they start working on that first use case, both learn what else can be done, from the other side, from the complementing side. And that kind of skyrockets to many more. And then you start moving from the experimentations stage into, actually seeing some value and making more traction. And like I said before, having a human in the loop, especially where the cost of going wrong could be high, gives you confidence to propel further. That's kind of what I see. But yeah, I mean, good to see this.
Yeah. No, that's practical advice, Sundar, in terms of how people can start to move beyond pilots and start to get into some success. Um, one of the things we decided to do is to of those companies that have finished pilots or proofs of concept or those that have gone beyond, we wanted to understand not just have you, been able to finish a pilot, but have you gotten the business value that you sought? So if you remember early on, we asked companies what their business objectives were, and we saw that cost and efficiency was the most common target that companies had. And so, when you look at that, you also see that that's where companies have made the most progress with cost and efficiency and production costs. That's not just though because those are the areas that were targeted the most, because this is we're asking companies specifically here, if you targeted, for example, revenue growth down at 22%, have you achieved it yet? So what we're seeing is not only are these probably the more common areas that companies are focused on, they're also the areas that maybe the low-hanging fruit, maybe the areas where companies have been able to finish those pilots and get some of the statistics, get some of the benefits that they were trying to achieve. Um, and then maybe some of these other targets that maybe aren't as common, but also maybe a little bit more difficult to achieve. Um, I think that it's important to look at the fact that there are definitely a range, but that I think they're not as dismal as I think some people may have pointed out. I think that there definitely are a lot of successes going on, particularly around quality, cost, efficiency. And Sundar, I know customer experience is important to you. That's one actually is showing up relatively closer to the top of the list with a good number of companies, over a quarter gaining the business value they're seeking there.
Yeah, I think also it could be the fact that on the left-hand side, like cost and efficiency, you can see the results immediately when you do something, versus there are other initiatives that may come later and is a more of a long-term benefit. But certain things, I mean, when you see result immediately, you feel like you want to do more, right? So that's the normal tendency. So that I'm not sure that might explain some of the tall bars up front. But I'm curious about how about the other half? Any insights on that?
Yeah, Senator, I think one of the things that's really interesting, and I'm going to ask everybody to stick with me a little bit as we go to this next chart because it's a little bit hard to interpret. I want to make sure people understand it. So I'm going to use an example of cost and efficiency first. We saw that of the companies that had targeted, and lots of companies had targeted cost and efficiency, we saw that 41% had already achieved that cost and efficiency, and that's the black bars that are down there. The blue bars represent, though, those companies that still expect to achieve the value. So in terms of the companies that haven't yet achieved the value, I think it is a yet. I don't think it's a we failed, because the companies are saying yes, we still expect to be able to achieve those values. Customer experience is a great example. Maybe 28%. It's taking a little bit longer, as you said, Sundar, to directly improve the customer experience with AI. So maybe, of those that targeted over a quarter, roughly 28% said they'd have been able to achieve it. But if you take that 28% and you add it to the 59%, that's 87% that still believe they're going to achieve that. So they're still in process. They still see that AI is going to help with customer experience. It just hasn't happened yet. So whether
Yeah.
it was a bit of a false start, maybe, or Sundar, as you said, maybe it's just those results take a little bit longer to show up.
Yeah, I think I mean with AI, as you might know, it's you get to the 80% very quickly. It's always the last mile problem, and sometimes that last mile matters to the business a lot, and you wanna iterate through it. So let me put it two ways. The blue bar, I see two sides of that uh, of that category. One side is, yes, it may not work the first time, so it's good that they're probably iterating on it, maybe giving it the right context or the right feedback or giving the right human reinforcement and improving the algorithm, whatever they're doing. The belief is still there, and they want to make it better, and that's good, right? Because you're actually helping improve the AI and make it work for you, right? So that's a good part. There is the other side where you have to be a little careful, is to not fall into this sunk cost fallacy, which is I've spent so much. Now I'm not going to give up and I'm just going to keep going, and you go deeper, deeper. You don't at some point you got to ask, is it still worth fighting? Maybe the problem has not been defined very well, or maybe you're doing it because you don't have conviction. You're doing it because you're supposed to do it. Those are the kinds of things. And because you spent so much time and energy into it, you just keep going, going, and not knowing when to stop. That's not a very good thing. So sometimes you do hear, we wasted this much money on doing things. So that's the second side. So the balance is needed. So we don't know who's going through, which side of that. But I'm just saying that there are probably two sides to watch for when it comes to the blue bars.
Yeah, I totally agree. Requires some good business sense to continue to evaluate and monitor and not focus on the technology for technology's sake, right?
Yes, and I mean, you might have heard this one-liner in probability and statistics. It says, all models are wrong, some are useful, right? So you actually focus on. Give me 1 second. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So. Yeah, that's one thing that might be a factor here for people to understand. When it's useful, let's move on and get value out of it and get it over incrementally. Uh, yeah, versus trying to wait for perfection.
Good. So let's jump into the time to value, because I think this is something that's interesting. Your point about not waiting for perfection is a good point here. One of the things that we see about AI, and we've seen this in some of our other surveys as well, is that AI takes advantage of a lot of benefits and a lot of value that's already been created. If you think about the time that we as an industry, IT, but also as manufacturers, have focused on building data, building structured data, capturing information about our customers, capturing information about our products and our plants. There's a tremendous amount of value that is ready to be unlocked from that. And I think that's one of the reasons that we're starting to see some of the AI initiatives really starting to provide benefit really quickly. And you see the statistic there. If you total up, 86% achieve benefits, within 12 months, in less than a year. And the sort of the big bubble there is around 28%, 1 to 3 months, and then another 22%. So you get 50% in sort of that 1 to 6 months. That's half of the companies in that range, some even faster. And so, I think that a lot of that has to do with the fact that they're leveraging existing data. It may also be because, unlike an enterprise system implementation, they may not be redefining full processes. And this might change if somebody is trying to do something that's not human in the loop, right? If somebody is trying to do something fully agentic, fully automated, that may take a little bit longer, but if you're augmenting what the person is doing, making them more efficient, giving them more information, then I think that's a way to gain value relatively quickly. Sundar, what are you seeing? I mean,
Yeah,
you're in this all the time.
I mean, this is great, and I mean, it's a lesson learned for me. In the past, I used to go and try to understand what problems we can solve for you, and approach it that way. But later on, I've learned that if we actually share that these are the problems we've already solved, what else can we solve? Then it helps people connect the dots, helps people to find those narrow edges and find some quick wins. Which drives momentum, to get the larger benefits with AI. So I'm guessing it's happening for some of these folks in the bars on the left-hand side. And there may be other large transformations, certain things like will take time and maybe so. I mean, we don't have a breakdown on the type of initiative here. If you were to look at this and break this down by I don't know, some t-shirt sizing, small, medium, large kind of projects, then do we have the small ones clustered to the left and the big ones clustered to the right would be a hypothesis. But that's my thought when I see this. Yeah.
Very good. It's interesting that we actually have asked about this in some of our earlier surveys as well to understand who are companies turning to for advice, who are they turning to for help, and if you go back to some of the challenges that we saw earlier about lack of knowledge, lack of time, lack of data science skills, this is clearly an area where people need to learn from each other. People need to gain insight from experimentation, but also from others that have gone before them. And one of the things that we saw is that um, the people we surveyed for this responded in a similar way to some of our earlier surveys, which is that they're looking for people that understand their knowledge, that understand their data, understand their knowledge base, understand their processes first, as opposed to maybe going out to some of the specialty providers and the people that are maybe AI experts. And there's a mix, obviously, that's important there. But I think that people are looking to trusted partners. They're looking to the Datacors of the world and saying, listen, you're our existing solution provider. We want you to help us through this. You've probably helped them through other technology transitions before and helped them take advantage of it. But that's definitely what we see is that companies are turning to those existing partners and saying that, yes, we need your help. We need to get through there. And less to sort of the management consultants and specialty consultants. Now, I want to make one asterisk, one little caveat on this. If you remember, the demographics for the survey was companies under 300 million in annual revenue. If you start going to the, $5 billion and above companies, are they working with the Deloittes and the Accentures and Capgeminis? Of course they are. And they probably also have centers of excellence. This is, for the more mid-sized companies, they really are turning to those that they trust to look for help.
Yeah, I mean, it's clearly saying domain expertise matters. And I mean, it's yesterday I was having a conversation with our team on a problem we are solving, and it was clearly obvious and how the domain expertise makes the difference, especially for the last mile and so on. So, uh, I mean, it's that combination of both the AI expertise as well as the domain expertise that kind of makes the magic happen and actually makes the solution useful, or even to break down the problem a certain way and say, hey, it can solve half the problem, and then we'll tackle the next half next, so that you don't wait for the entire solution to get its usefulness. You start incrementally getting value out of it. So all those things happen uh, with uh, partners, with a partnership where you have a blend of both AI expertise as well as the domain expertise. People who are closest to the problems know it well. So it sounds pretty intuitive, but yeah.
Senator, we're also seeing, and I know you and I talked about this, we're starting to see a little bit different relationship between vendor and customer or vendor and user. I always hate to use the term to users, but we're starting to see a little bit different relationship because with some software, you create a transaction or you create a capability and they wait for it and then it's there and they implement it. And AI is a little bit different, right? You're providing a little bit more capabilities. I feel like there's a little bit more of a partnership back and forth, where you're helping them through. You're not saying, hey, here's the answer, you click this button, click this button, click this button. It's more of
Yeah.
a, hey, let us hold hands with you a little bit, understand where your challenges are. We'll show you where we've solved that challenge before. We understand how to apply these tools to it. I think you said you're kind of seeing that change too.
Yeah, I mean, forward deployed engineers is one way to
Mm-hmm.
where that's actioned. But yes, absolutely, we want to shape our products with through a partnership with our users, right? That's the key part, and especially with AI, which one thing that's different with AI than any other software is that it gets better with usage and with proper context and training and all that stuff, right? So it gets better with that. Uh, I think the other place uh, where it's important, also I feel, is with any new technology. I mean, our tendency is to look backwards and say, what have we done so far, and how can I do it better, faster, cheaper? Which is important, needs to happen, and which is why many of your stats, I think you see a lot of the categories on the left hand side that way. Uh, but then with any new technology, you also get the opportunity to say, what can I do now that I could never do before? But that requires some level of forced thinking or going against the inertia to think that way. And sometimes partnership helps. Can we redefine and transform the whole thing into something else? Like Henry Ford, I think he said that naturally when he asks people, what do you want, they say, I want faster horses. So it's like that. Nothing wrong with that, but you have to start. So you need both is my point. And it's an and, not an or. But I think that's what I think we as an industry need to do, and that way we can transform, and win together. That's kind of how I feel.
All right, let's bring up our summary slide here, and then we're going to move to Q&A. We concluded the survey with saying that companies that have gained value from AI are finding ways to scale, improving their AI maturity, and widening their advantages over the competition. And again, it's a small number of companies that are in that group that are really starting to take advantage, but we're starting to see them you know, turn the corner and start to apply to maybe a new plant or apply it to a new problem or if it's an R&D thing, apply it to a new product line, for example. So I do think that there's this potential of things changing pretty drastically. You mentioned Ford. I'll bring up Amazon. When the web came up, there were a lot of people that were just starting to say, you know what, I need to have my product brochure online, and Amazon decided to fundamentally change, starting with the book industry, but really fundamentally change the basics of an industry in terms of how we buy and sell things and have them delivered. Um, so there's just a lot going on, and I think a lot at stake, Sundar. You know, what should a manufacturer do next? I mean, what's the playbook for them?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of kind of what we've said before, and I think this slide kind of summarizes, on how you can saying what's next. If you haven't started, get started with one, and we can get the flywheel effect after that, and then find narrow cases to maximize success and leverage your partners and the combination of mainly the domain expertise and the AI expertise to maximize success. And then also think in both dimensions, like I said before, is what can we do better, faster, cheaper that we're doing today, and what can we do differently that we've never done before, right? So uh, yeah, I mean, I think different people are at different stages in that life cycle, like you shared, and depending on which stage you are, I mean, you could. I think these things typically guarantee a good success.
All right. Well, I think that wraps it up. I did want to address, there was a few questions that came in about Datacor products specifically. So we will be having another webinar on Datacor's AI capabilities and use cases on May 26th. This is really thought leadership and industry coverage. So with that, I think it's actually a great opportunity to ask this question. Chris wants to know, how should leaders present this to teams to make it a collaborative effort to understand what capabilities can be added, excuse me, to create value with all of the time and efficiency gains? So it sounds to me like Chris is looking to figure out how do they get their team to collaborate and adopt.
Yeah, I'll start on that, Sundar. I know you've got experience as well. I do think that there are two things that have worked, throughout time in terms of helping people, adopt new technologies and change the way they do things. I mean, the technology is the enabler. It's about changing the way people are doing their jobs and how they're going about solving a problem. And I think the things that are important there are, first of all, starting with from a business perspective, start with a real problem. Don't make something up. If you're doing something in the plant, find that area where you're always wasting time because batch records don't get in time, and you're not releasing, you're not able to release things, and you've got late customer shipments. If it's in R&D, maybe find an issue where documentation of recipes or formulas or specs is taking too long, or something's taking too long for compliance. Find real problems to solve is the first thing. I think the second thing to present it is to leaders, but then also to the people that need to do it, is the what's in it for me. This should not be an AI project. This shouldn't be we're going to learn about AI. This isn't going to be we're going to experiment with Claude, or we're going to experience with ChatGPT or Grok or whatever it may be. This is we're going to solve a problem and make it personal. What's in it for the people that are involved? If it's in the back office, and it's going to be something that's going to help streamline a process and take out a manual step. Okay, what are you going to then allow that person to do more of? Maybe that white glove customer service that Sundar talked about earlier. How is it going to enrich that person's life? So, Chris, your question was really about the leaders. So I would definitely say from them, make sure that it's about the business, but because it needs to be a collaborative effort, that's where I would say it's the what's in it for me with the people that are going to be involved, and everybody needs to get together, behind a joint mission. And that mission shouldn't be AI. The mission should be quality, efficiency, customer service, innovation, whatever the right business goal is.
Yep. I mean, I agree. I think fall in love with the problem and have conviction on the problem and ask the five whys to say, will it move the dial for us? I think that's a good place to start. And then I think the rest will follow. And then the more specific uh, we are, the better. That's where the narrow edges help, or just reach out for help if you have a very broad uh, cloud and you want to narrow it down, reach out for help with your trusted partner, and I'm sure a way can be figured out. Yeah.
Nick followed up to Chris's comment with including the team in the adoption strategy, which I think that comes out of data governance, right? We saw a lot of lessons learned where it was pushed onto teams rather than it being collaborative. So,
Yeah, well,
um,
it's great to
Yeah, I
see
think
you answering
that's a
Q&A. Yeah.
yeah, I think that's a good point, Tracy, because the more people are invested in shaping the product and the solution, the the more ownership and conviction and accountability they have towards it to make it successful. So yeah, good point.
we have one anonymous question. Realistically, how can mid-sized companies start building AI capability? We don't have data science staff and already stretched thin.
So no, I think your advice right on the screen is maybe the best place to start there, right?
Yes, I think start with what with the problems, and I mean, uh, if we don't have internal help, just connect with your partners and getting started is the first step. It sounds obvious, but many times it's hard because we try to come up with something big or transformational to start with something small, or even if the question is how do we get started, I think that's one way. I mean, not knowing much about the problems you want to solve or what business you're in, hard for me to give a straight, direct answer. But I would say start with problems. Start with what problems uh, you think are the biggest ones to tackle first, and then the rest will follow. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a lot of good learning available right now about how to solve problems. Look for companies that have solved a similar problem. I know that one of the things I just came back from a user conference not long ago, and I saw a lot of people talking to their peers, and it wasn't an AI user conference. It was an enterprise systems user conference. And people were sharing ideas and sharing approaches that they'd use. So I would say turn to some of your peers as well as turn to some of your trusted partners. So no, you guys
Maybe,
have
yeah,
one coming up, though.
maybe another angle also is, I mean, I don't know the audience exactly. I mean, if you're on the floor, you can define a problem because you're close to it. But let's say, as a leader of the company, another way to start is, what metric or what KPI or what dial do I want to move, for the company? Is it the cost dial? Is it the revenue dial? You can even start there and say, okay, what makes up that? And just breaking down a problem. But to start with a problem, you can go top down, bottom up, either way. And then obviously, like Tracy said, we will share a lot of our webinars with the products and services that we are building. Sometimes looking at that may trigger a thought saying, "Oh, I could also do this," and that's what I meant by connecting the dots earlier in the webinar. So yeah, that's my answer. Yep.
Okay, thanks. So we are out of time, and I'm sorry, but so again, we will be hosting a Datacor product specific webinar on May 26th. So for those that had questions that were specifically around Datacor products, please keep an eye out for that invite. We will send out the slides, the recording, as well as the reports to all of the research around AI that was conducted. And we're out of time, but I really appreciate you, Sundar and Jim, doing this and kind of sharing what the market is, where the market is with their AI journey.
Thanks for including me. I really it was a fun project, and I hope people get a lot of value out of it, and good luck with everybody's AI journeys.
Yep.
Great.
Thanks for having us. Enjoyed it. Thank you.
Bye-bye.